Congressional Advocacy Day for the 2023 International Religious Freedom Summit, and I'm one of two co-chairs who have been tasked with this great work of bringing communities together to advocate for each other on matters pertaining to religious persecution. Drew Bowling, who's somewhere here, I saw him earlier, there's Drew somewhere. He is a terrific partner who's been assisting me in a very, very busy day today. And we are gathered here on this Monday at a time when there's intense scrutiny and over terrible persecution that's affecting a number of communities. And the International Religious Freedom Summit, the third annual summit, will begin shortly tomorrow, actually beginning tonight. And many people from some 70 organizations have gathered really globally and domestically to be here from so many different faith communities. And we're here for one particular aim, which is advocating for religious freedom for everyone everywhere. But here on Capitol Hill, we feel there's an immense need to educate our members of Congress, both in the House and Senate, about developments affecting a number of communities. And we won't be able to feature all the communities tonight because there's so many communities that are suffering, but we remember them and we advocate for them. In fact, I'll say I'm very pleased to report that I received some of the tentative numbers, and our very able co-chairs of the summit, Dr. Katrina Manto-Sweat and Ambassador Sam Brownback, who will both be addressing us tonight, don't yet know these numbers, but I'll kind of share them because they're kind of trickling in here in the late hour. But we have cleared 200 meetings in Congress in about 8 hours. And that itself is, a meaningful statistic, but what's meaningful about it is not so much the number of meetings. What's meaningful about it is the manner in which this coalition has come together. Because the people who are taking these meetings come from different walks of life. There are Christians and Uyghurs and Rohingya and Ahmadi Muslims and Yazidis and members of the Jewish community, members of the Falun Gong, so many, the Sikhs, the Hindu community, so many beleaguered communities in so many parts of the world who are here together advocating for each other. We call this event In Solidarity with the Persecuted. A few years ago when we had this thought, the thought crossed my mind that all the years that we've all been advocating for our respective communities, we realize that there are immense courageous voices, great choruses that exist all over Congress. We see amazing luminaries talking about their own people, as well as they should. But what really makes advocacy special and effective is when those communities stand up for each other, and more importantly, speak for each other. That's when these choruses become a piece of beautiful sheet music and a symphony, really, that you can change the hearts and minds of people when they see that we are together. In the Quran, the holy book of Islam, as an Ahmadi Muslim, that we believe in the Quran and its truth, there's a verse of the Quran or a phrase of the Quran that says, Bunyanun marsus, which means a wall of molten lead or a block of molten lead. And when believers come together from different walks of life, they are as strong as a wall of molten lead. That, to me, is very special, and that's kind of the purpose that we are gathered for here today. This morning, we held a kickoff breakfast featuring amazing speakers, and many of us were about to set off to our meetings, and I'm getting all of these wonderful reports and photos from the Senate and the House, and many people met with members of the House and the Senate directly. This is an active day of Congress today. And uniformly, the feedback that I've received, the Congressional Working Group is here, the co-chairs are here. They told me they cleared 50 meetings with the Earth Secretariat, and the feedback that we're receiving uniformly, I just came back from Senator Klobuchar's office a little while ago, and the feedback that we're receiving is, this is really special. This is different. This is a coalition. This is something that's mature. So we're hoping that this spark will create the right kind of conflagration that will lead to real change. And the fire inside of us is with our advocacy and our passion, and that will hopefully ignite the hearts to defend those who are persecuted. Because after all, why are we here? We're here for those prisoners of conscience who are in jail right now only because they believe in their own faith. Wherever that may be, in a dark prison cell, corners of the world we can't comprehend, maybe some sleeping right now at this hour, not knowing whether they'll be alive or dead the next day. Why? Because they're a Christian, because they're a Uyghur Muslim, because they're a member of the Yazidi community. That's all? That's the crime? This is wrong in 2023, and this summit and what we're doing here today is attempting to change that. So to that end, I want to start off by inviting one of our two co-chairs for the summit, Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat, to share some remarks. Most of you know Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat, the daughter of the late Tom Lantos, Congressman Tom Lantos, from whom the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission in this very body is named after, who is a stalwart advocate for human rights. But Katrina is really a luminary in this space. She teaches at Tufts. She runs a wonderful foundation, the Tom Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. And I asked her to kick us off with some remarks.
Thank you so much, Amjad. You spoke very eloquently, and your words are particularly powerful because your community has just in the last few days suffered a terrible, terrible attack, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But I first want to welcome everybody here today. It's very exciting now that this is the third annual International Religious Freedom Summit, because I see so many wonderful old friends. Some of them are young, but they are old friends to me now, and of course so many new faces. And it gives me a sense of hope and encouragement that this movement that we are building has real momentum behind it. And one of the people, more than any other, who has done an extraordinary amount to build that momentum has been none other than my dear friend Amjad Khan, who has really been an incredible force, not only because he's a great organizer and he has really fantastic ideas about how to bring people together, but Amjad himself embodies the very essence of what we try to be about: deep respect for the convictions and faith and beliefs of all, and a willingness to put himself on the line for others. And he really inaugurated this whole idea of standing in solidarity and speaking, not just standing up, but speaking on behalf of communities other than your own. So I want to thank you, Amjad, for being so inspirational to so many of us. As I was thinking about what I might say to this particular group, and it's very exciting that this is a congressional briefing, I found myself reflecting and reading back to Martin Luther King Jr.'s very famous, very iconic letter from a Birmingham jail, which I'm sure many of you have read. Obviously, he was an extraordinary human rights leader, but what was particularly powerful and, if you will, convicting about the letter from a Birmingham jail is that it was really sort of a document, a cry of admonishment towards not his enemies, not those who were throwing him in jail and setting the dogs on the civil rights activists, but on their allies, on their quiet, moderate, restrained, reluctant allies. And in that very powerful letter, parts of which have become kind of iconic in sort of the lexicon of the civil rights movement and the broader human rights movement, he tries to lovingly reprove them for an unwillingness to do exactly what you are asking us to do, Amjad, and what those of us here today feel in our hearts we are called to do. And that is not simply to offer from the safe distance, from a convenient remove, sort of our well wishes and hey, good luck, all the best. We hope everything works out. But to step forward, to stand alongside, to go into the breach, and yes, sometimes to put our own comfort, our own security, our own ease at risk. One of the things, and I love this because it echoes things my father used to tell me when he was doing his human rights work, but one of the very famous quotes from that letter, and I encourage you all to read it. He said, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And I hear in those powerful words, or I hear in our motto, religious freedom for everyone, everywhere, all the time, an echo of what it was he was trying to teach us. I think this profound insight makes us realize that we can't in good conscience seek to protect our own communities, to fight for the rights of our own people. I'm the daughter of Jewish Holocaust survivors, so anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial is always so important to me. You know, I've got my antenna tuned as my friends in the Ahmadiyya community have their antenna tuned, and in the Armenian community and in the Uyghur community, our antenna are tuned to the wrongs and the depredations being inflicted on our own people. But that isn't enough. We have to understand that if we do not advocate for others who suffer as our own people suffer, then we are really failing in our duty. You know, as we gather today in a really beautiful, on a beautiful day, in a beautiful, august venue, just in the past days, literally in the past days, people of faith, various faiths, have been facing horrific persecution and danger. And I do want to begin with what happened to members of the Ahmadiyya community in Burkina Faso first. It's particularly chilling because 10 faithful Ahmadiyya men were dragged from their place of worship. And in an act that is much more chilling and much more terrifying, and I'm sure intended to be so, than even a terrorist bomb that is thrown into a building and goes off and many people are injured and killed. These brave and faithful men were dragged out and one by one threatened to deny their faith. And they wouldn't, and one by one, in front of their families, in front of their fellow believers, they were murdered in cold blood. And you know, it's horrifying and it's also incredibly inspiring. Those 10 men have become martyrs. And we, of course, find each of ourselves asking the question, would I have that kind of integrity? Would I have that integrity to say no? In the end, the integrity of my soul means more than my life, and I will not turn my back on it. I don't know what the answer is. You know, we all hope we would have that kind of courage, but we darn well better have the courage to do something for that community and to show that we will not let this outrage go unpunished. Other examples, in Nigeria, in just the past 2 years, over 6,000 Christians have been murdered for their faith and thousands more kidnapped. In China, which just based on sheer numbers is the world's greatest abuser and crusher of conscience rights in the world, we know that an ongoing genocide is taking place against an entire community, a whole community of people. I see friends of mine from the Uyghur community, again, their bravery, their courage, I admire it so much. But, you know, that's not good enough to admire their courage, to commend it. We have got to find ways to take our own leaders lovingly by the throat and shake them a little bit and say, more needs to be done. We have tools, we have leverage, we do have some power, and we are not exercising it. We cannot be quiet in this fight. And now this is a concern of mine because it has gotten so little attention in the broader media. But in the contested region of Nagorno-Karabakh, probably some of you are saying, oh, I've heard of it, I know about that a little bit. But what you may not know, because it has gotten very little attention and coverage, is that there is an enclave of Armenian Christians that is being ethnically cleansed. They are being cut off from access to food, to medicine, to anything by the government of Azerbaijan. This is a huge unfolding crisis that is largely ignored. And maybe for some of you here today, my mentioning of it might be the first time you've heard of that. So the need is very great. It is very real. It is very pressing. And today's event is not only going to educate us through briefings on various communities and what they are dealing with, but it is hopefully going to light a fire under us, not to be among those that the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. had to reprimand. At one point he said, the shallow support of our friends is more painful than the out-and-out enmity of those who hate us. We must do better. And I'm going to close with a story because I love stories. And I think they help us to remember what it is we should be about. This morning when I spoke at the breakfast, I talked about Cyrus the Great, who was a very powerful leader who issued what many believe to have been the first charter of human rights in human history, 500 years BC. And it's the Cyrus Cylinder, and I invite you to look it up on your own. And I asked the question of the audience gathered there. I said, does anybody know what faith Cyrus the Great was an adherent to? And I think it was Amjad who answered the question. He went to Harvard. He's one of these really smart kids who does all of his homework and reads everything. And he said quite correctly he was a Zoroastrian. I said, that's right. Well, this story also comes from that community, also sometimes called the Parsi community. And they were being persecuted. This story dates from the 1600s and is called the story of Sanjan. Some of you may have heard it before. And the Parsi community was fleeing from persecution by Muslim invaders of Persia many centuries earlier. They had come to Gujarat in western India. And there are two versions of the story recounting their arrival in Gujarat. In one version, they arrive to the borders, and the king sends them a jar of milk filled to the brim. And the point of sending that is to say, there's no room for you here. Don't come. We don't have any place for you in our lands. What they did was, they took a spoonful of sugar and poured it into the jar of milk and sent it back to the king. And by that, they intended to say, we can fit in and become part of this place, and we will sweeten it. We will make it better. The other version of the story, and I like both of them, has them dropping a gold ring into the jar of milk. Again, not enough to displace it, not enough to cause it to overflow and the milk to be lost. And the point of that response to the king was to suggest that while this community, yes, would retain their identity, they would remain that golden circle in the jar of milk, that they would enrich and bring strength and wealth and better things to the land if they would be accepted. I love these stories because, both versions, because they remind us that when we stand up for some community, some group who we could easily think of as the other, as unwelcome, not part of us, our community is sweetened. Our community is strengthened and enriched in so many ways. And it is that spirit of recognizing and valuing and cherishing what it is we bring to each other. Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of England, he was the chief rabbi there, such a brilliant, insightful man, passed away not too long ago. But he said something, and we're doing it from memory, so forgive me if it's not perfect, but the gist of it was that when I bring what only I can bring to my community, to my country, to my nation, and my world, and do so by being authentically me, I strengthen others to also bring what only they can bring. And as I look around this room, I know the precious gifts of so many communities, and only you can bring those gifts to this country, and only you can bring those gifts to the world. And we each have a duty to try and fight for a world where we all can bring our gifts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Katrina Manta-Sweat, for those words. Always inspiring to have you speak and advocate for so many. I would now like to invite former Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, who's one of the co-chairs, of course, as everyone knows, of the Religious Freedom Summit. Ambassador.
Thank you, Amjad. Appreciate it. Thank you, Amjad. Hi, everybody. Good to see you all late in the afternoon on a Monday afternoon. The room's a bit warm. If you want to take a nap, go ahead. It'll be just fine. You know, as I said, everybody needs a little break. Katrina does such a beautiful job of speaking. I just want to draw this to a real blunt point. Amjad and I were talking not 2 weeks ago, and 8 Ahmadis were killed in Burkina Faso. 9 Ahmadi Muslims were killed in Burkina Faso for not renouncing their faith, each cornered, given a chance to live if they would renounce their faith, wouldn't do it, and killed in front of everybody else. A priest in Nigeria was burnt alive in his home. I'm going to say this was 10 days, 2 weeks ago, Nina, that took place. One of a number that this has happened to in recent times. And continues to happen and grow. And these are just a couple of things that have happened within the past couple of weeks, and that's why we fight, and that's why we're here. That we've really got to get this thing stopped, or you're going to see a continued whole bunch of these things happening. You've got 120,000, mostly Armenian Christians, getting strangled in Nagorno-Karabakh now. They're not strangled yet, but supplies are being cut off now that this is happening. And meanwhile, the rest of us everybody dithers a little bit, says, well, it's really not that people hate somebody else, or it's really this factor, or it's really that factor. At the end of the day, people are dying. And they're dying primarily because of their faith. It may not be the only factor, but I think in some cases, or in a lot of these cases, it is the only factor. It's the motivating factor that caused somebody else out of just a pure level of hate to say, I will kill you, and does it. You got West Africa, the whole place could go up into a fire now with what's taking place and what's shaping up in that entire region of the Sahel. This could be just a horrific situation, and the terrorist groups all know it. So they're all pouring financing into this region, pouring hatred into the region as well, because you got to change a population to get them to kill people. You prepare people for peace, and you prepare them for war, and they're preparing people for war. So it's on these really aren't people; they're vermin. They don't deserve to live, and this is being spewed, and this is happening. In 2023 in our world, and we live in a country, and we are in a place that can do something about it. Now, that doesn't mean we can do it tomorrow about it, but we've got to start doing it today. And we can do these things. And it just always, whenever I hear any of these stories, it just gets me at the gut level that we've got to step up the efforts more, folks. And all of you are working hard at this. I'm not saying none of you aren't. But we've got to either work better. We've got to elevate the topic. We've got to get it to be a major foreign policy issue for not just the United States, but it needs to be for us, but for a lot of different countries, particularly the Western countries. We've got to confront these situations. We've got to call evil as it is, that this is evil. When somebody just wants to kill, is willing to kill somebody else simply because of their faith, that is evil. It is evil. And it's genocide. And we've seen a number of cases. Almost every genocide over the last 100 years is of a religious minority. I think I can think of one that wasn't. The rest are all of religious minorities. You just go, this person believes different than me, and they don't deserve to live. And I'm going to kill them. Or I'm going to motivate enough people to kill them. So that's why we've just got to step up our advocacy more, and we've got to get pointed about it. Almost every social movement that's ever successful, you got to show the face of things to people. You got to put it right in their face. You got to see it. You got to smell it, taste it. And then they kind of, okay, maybe we really need to do something. And I think that's what we've got to do. That's our task. We can do it. We have to do it. We don't do it, nobody's going to get it done. So I really appreciate you being here today. And this is a great task that you're about, and we are going to be successful. Just we've got to lean in. God bless you all. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Ambassador. Before you came in, I revealed that we hit over 200 offices in 8 hours today. So we're doing our part slowly but surely, and we need a lot more, but hopefully we get there. The program today is interesting, and we have some amazing people who are working in this space, and we wanted to have a few faith communities talk a little bit for 3 to 5 minutes, just an update about what's happening to the particular communities for which they are advocating. And we're going to begin this afternoon with the Rohingya Muslim community. And we're very delighted to be joined by Patrick Greenswald, who's a policy analyst for the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. He focuses on Southeast Asia, primarily Burma, Laos, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And as we know, there's a genocide against the Rohingya Muslim community, a community that all of us should be advocating for as well. So I invite Patrick to share his remarks.
All right, thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to speak alongside a very distinguished set of religious freedom advocates and leaders. My name is Patrick Greenwald. I'm a policy analyst at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. This is also known as USERF. We're a legislative agency tasked with monitoring conditions of freedom of religion and belief internationally to make recommendations to the U.S. government on how to incorporate a human rights perspective on religious freedom in our U.S. foreign policy. I'd like to start by just plugging that the subject we're talking about here, we'll talk a little more at length in our February 8th hearing on Burma. USERF has been concerned with the conditions of FORB in Burma since the beginning of our commission in 1999. A core component of our concern has been for the conditions of the predominantly Muslim Rohingya people native to Rakhine State in Burma. This population has long been singled out for their ethnic identity, but also their religious identity as a Muslim majority population in a Buddhist, predominantly Muslim population in a Buddhist majority country. We consider them really a case study for what happens when religious freedom violations are ignored and enabled to the point where genocide can occur. At the end of 2022, there are some 600,000 Rohingya left in Burma, around 1 million in Bangladesh, and a few 100,000 in primarily Malaysia, but around the region. During 2022, the UN reported that some 3,500 Rohingya have attempted sea crossings throughout the region. Human trafficking remains a concern for the community, and women are particularly vulnerable. In November 2022, I was part of a USERF delegation that visited various Rohingya groups in Cox's Bazar. For the most part, Rohingya there are safe from religious persecution, but they're in a state of limbo, and the security situation in the camps is not stable. Most whom we spoke to share the dream of returning to a free, democratic, multi-ethnic, and multi-confessional Burma. For this to be realized, the political situation in Burma would need to change significantly. That's a conversation that might be beyond our mandate, so I'd like to speak a little more focused on the condition of refugees in the camps. Neither Bangladesh nor Malaysia, the two largest host countries to refugees, are party to the 1951 Convention on Refugees. This means that they have limited international obligations to refugees. The Rohingya people in Bangladesh whom we visited are facing restrictions and funding shortages imposed in part by the Bangladeshi government's refusal to permit any funding but humanitarian aid for the refugee camps. This is due to their concern that of the appearance of permanence and integration. There is no legal freedom of movement beyond the camps and no legal access to employment. Concern for the appearance of permanence has also restricted what can be built in the camps. Construction of sturdy structures using concrete, whether for homes or schools, is significantly restricted, and structures cannot be higher than 1 story. The government of Bangladesh, to its credit, has recently permitted a livelihood and skills training program for Rohingya youth and adults. The government has also enabled the establishment of a Burmese curriculum for Rohingya children, who constitute some 52% of the over 1 million Rohingya in the camps. This leads to what USURF recommends to the U.S. government. Both of these initiatives are important and deserve international support. However, they can only be funded by humanitarian aid. For the international organizations operating in the camps, there's a critical need for funds to scale up these initiatives to reach the majority of the population. USURF consistently recommends the U.S. government, therefore, to find creative ways to fund these initiatives and to coordinate with the international community so as to partner with our friends in the Bangladeshi government. And finally, USURF continues to advocate that the U.S. government pursue its policy of resettlement in an effort to share the burden costs in providing for this refugee community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick, for enlightening us on those recommendations, and particularly from USURF. We look forward to seeing that briefing coming up. Our second speaker is from the persecuted Yazidi community, Pari Ibrahim. She's the founder and executive director of the Free Yazidi Foundation. Welcome back, Pari.
Thank you very much, and thank you our allies and supporters of our community, but also from all the other communities who are here today. It is unfortunate that we need a summit like this to show that religious freedom is not a given. And it saddens me that almost 9 years ago, there was the Yazidi genocide, where the Islamic State came and targeted the Yazidi community because of who they are, because of their religion. And it's unfortunate for me and many others to see that these genocides against people are still happening till today. As I said, 9 years onward, our people are in the hundreds of thousands still displaced in internally displaced people camps. Some try to leave as refugees, a dangerous road to go for new hope, new future. But many in the IDP camps have lost hope and the will to live. Suicide rates among the younger generation are up. Unemployment is above 80%. Our people are still afraid, and nobody can guarantee their safety or security if they go back to Sinjar, where all of this happened. Turkey has created instability in Iraq and Syria. So till today, our people are unable to go back to where they came from, and that's why they live in displacement settings. When you look at justice and accountability, there's a lot of support from the U.S. government to try to find the perpetrators who did this to our people. But we only see glimmers of justice, and there's no coherent justice framework. We see some cases here or there, and that's all. But we're talking about a genocide of a big terrorist organization. We're talking about enslavement, slave trade, murder, rape. People were slave traded. Yazidi women were kidnapped and sold as sex slaves in markets in Iraq and Syria. look away today, then the next atrocity happens tomorrow. Over the last many years, we've tried to get support and funding for civil society organizations who directly support the people. I'm hopeful that governments, organizations still continue with that, because we do see change. We are making our own community stronger. We're teaching them different things. We're teaching them to see the warning signs, to not accept when someone says, "Oh, you're a Yazidi." What does that mean? What have you learned at home about me being a Yazidi? Because obviously you're amazed that I look very different from what you've been taught at home. And those are the root causes of the genocide. But my people really try to survive every single day. So this is not a big deal. This is just once again something that's been said. But I've said many times and over the years, and especially this platform that's been given to us over the last few years, the root causes that created the genocide against the Yazidis, the Christians, other ethnic and religious minorities in Iraq, they've never been solved. People still do not eat the food of my people because they are Yazidis. That is unacceptable. Why are we not changing these ideas of people? Why are we not changing what they've been taught for many years? And that's what we're trying to do. We started a bakery to help make sure that people understand everyone is able to make a bakery, and you should just try the food of other people and accept each other through eating food, eating bread together. And that's why I say it's so important to help civil society, to give them a voice so that they can tell you what needs to change. What needs to change is that we can provide safety and security to people who do not believe in it anymore. Because otherwise, they will knock on your doors to come to different countries where safety is guaranteed. Once again, I want to thank all the allies and supporters of my people, that I stand in solidarity with all the communities who suffer until today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pari. Very powerful words. I now invite Zubaria Shamseddin, the Chinese outreach coordinator for the Uyghur Human Rights Project, to talk about the persecuted Uyghur Muslim community.
Good afternoon. My name is Zubaira Shamsuddin. The Uyghur Human Rights Project would like to thank the Congress for passing two landmark laws: the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act in 2020 and the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act in 2021. These two laws are unmatched anywhere else in the world, but more must be done. The horrific situation of Uyghurs in East Turkestan is considered an ongoing atrocity crimes under international law. In 2021, the State Department determined these crimes to be crimes against humanity and an ongoing genocide. This is a quote from a Chinese official about how to crush the Uyghur people. In quote, break their lineage, break their roots, break their connections, and break their origins. Completely shovel up the roots of two-faced people, dig them out, and the will to fight these two-faced people until the end. Quote close. There are 48 reasons to place Uyghurs in concentration camps. Any religious expression, like growing a beard, wearing a headscarf, praying at home, or fasting during the Ramadan. It can be attending a traditional wedding or praying at a funeral, and more. In reality, just being Uyghur is enough to be taken away into a camp. I think everyone knows that the government has rounded up and estimated 2 to 3 million Uyghurs into mass internment camps since 2016. There are unknown numbers of death in custody. New reporting confirms that many people are being detained for a second or third time. Outside camps, there's 24/7 high-tech surveillance, modern-day slavery in Chinese factories, dislocation, forced sterilization, family separation, and forced assimilation. For example, this recent report from the Uyghur Human Rights Project about forced marriage, you can access through online. UHRP has documented the atrocity since 2004, including my brother Abdurazak Shamsuddin's case, this is my brother, Abdurazak Shamsuddin. He was arrested in 1998 in connection with the Gulja massacre in my hometown. It's been 25th year this year, 2023. He's still in prison. In April 1998, my nephew was shot dead while he was gathering with his friends during the month of Ramadan for a special prayer. He was only 22 years old at the time. His crime was he was a student who studied religion in Egypt. In 1998, my 24-year-old cousin Abdul Abdurrashid was sentenced to death. My sister and cousins attended trial. 20 young Uyghurs were sentenced to death in an open trial and paraded in the back of open truck through the streets, then shot in the head in front of an assembling crowd. My sister witnessed this cruelty and became speechless. After the killing, Chinese police came to my uncle's house and forced him to pay for the cost of the bullet used to shoot my cousin. Some members of the Congress have said that they are worried that if criticize the Chinese Communist Party too much, this will encourage, in quote, anti-Asian hate. We need to be very clear. If we don't impose sanctions, we are actually encouraging genocide. Religious persecution is a global crisis and requires a global response. Every single person on this panel, in this room, needs America to take action against religious persecution. If the U.S. Congress does not take action, who will? Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Very moving words. Continuing to hear from representatives and advocates about persecuted communities, I now invite Qudus Malik, who is the Executive Director of Global Lawyers for Refugees, to speak about the persecuted Ahmadi Muslim community.
Hi everybody, it's great to be here, and it's chilling to hear all these accounts. I really like the story that Katrina shared with us about the pot of milk and the gold ring in it, and I think that it applies to the Ahmadi Muslim community very much. This community built Pakistan brick by brick. It stood with the founders of Pakistan when nobody was willing to stand with them. And after independence, they continued to play that role. And even today, I see a lot of fellow Pakistani Ahmadis there, and their heart still bleeds for Pakistan. And sometimes people have asked us that, after what Pakistan does to you, where do you continue to fight this love for this country and for these people? And the answer is based in the principles of Islam and the principles of who we are. There are so many different, the best analogy that I can think of is that it's almost like an anaconda that is squeezing the Ahmadiyya community worldwide, and every time they exhale, it tightened its grip. And it spreads various continents, it spreads various people, and it spreads in different domains. There's hate speech from government that you can't expect a statement like that from a minister or from an ambassador or from even a human being. So the current, and this is a party that is considered to be a secular party, their current federal minister for railways, he tweeted that Qadianiyat, this was a few weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, Qadianiyat and Zionism is a conspiracy to pierce the heart of Islam. Remember, Qadianiyat, Ahmadiyat is not a separate religion, rather it is a great sedition, we have no doubt. And this is a sitting federal minister. A previous minister who was ironically called I think he was the special representative for religious harmony. He said that we can accept everybody else in this country, but not Ahmadis. Tahir Ashrafi. And these tweets, the government of Pakistan refuses to take any action. But this morning, as I was looking at trying to prepare for this presentation, we got an email from the government of Pakistan asking one of our websites called Open Quran, which is just for us to learn the Holy Quran. And it said that we're giving you 48 hours and we will shut it down unless you respond and tell us how you're not breaking these laws. 2 years ago, Amjad received a similar notice, and they continue to do it. 2 weeks ago, it was Malta. So they don't take action against comments, the ones that I've just read, but they go after Ahmadis sitting in foreign countries to target them. Today there was a UPR session in Geneva, and the foreign minister of Pakistan, as every time before, they said that all Pakistanis have full rights. They have the ability to vote. They tell us that if you want to vote, you have to declare yourself to be a non-Muslim. And somehow the government thinks that that is enough of a right. They are demolishing our mosques. We don't have the ability to build new mosques. We don't have the ability to be buried in common graveyards. And just if you look at the last 6 months, it is impossible to even keep track of what's going on. And it's no longer a slow burn. It's trending in a very, very negative direction. Another thing I have here is a forced name change. The Supreme Court of Pakistan said that Ahmadis should not have Muslim names. 2 years ago, I was in Pakistan, and one of my cousin's wife, she told me that when she went to pay her utility bill, the official there said that if you're, and they used the wrong word, but if you're an Ahmadi, how can your husband be called Muhammad? And then the rest of the name. He said, wait here. He went inside and he changed his name to Ghulam. And now every time that utility bill comes, she is the wife of somebody that has a first name that's not her husband. And this is backed by a decision of the Supreme Court. There's arrest of our top leadership. And we've been working very closely, but I think that there are arrest warrants out for FIRs for most of the leadership of the Ahmadi Muslim community in Pakistan. So it is very, and then if you go outside of Pakistan, Ahmadis were the first religious minority that the Taliban went after the U.S. withdrawal in Afghanistan. Algeria, hundreds of Algerian Ahmadis are being convicted by courts due to their Ahmadi faith. There's a Middle Eastern country, I cannot name it, but recently they prevented, less than a month ago, they prevented a senior Arab Ahmadi leader from traveling to attend an Ahmadi convention abroad, him and his wife. There's another Middle Eastern country that, again, I cannot name, but they have imprisoned an Ahmadi citizen of that country, and they've not charged him, and he continues to languish there, for years. All of COVID he's been inside. And there's another Middle Eastern country where there's a 78-year-old Arab Ahmadi, and they're trying to force him to recant. I guess he's luckier than the people in Burkina Faso, but he continues to pay the price for believing in Ahmadiyyat. So this is a very important issue, and we all have, you've been working on some of these issues, but I think that there's something unique about the persecution of Ahmadis because it's coming from Islam, it's coming from Muslim countries, and we, despite everything, we believe that the antidote for this persecution is not outside of Islam. It is the true teachings of the Holy Quran, and it's the true teachings of the Holy Prophet of Islam that will resolve these issues. So it's not that we are inviting or asking our Muslim brothers to redefine Islam. They just need to go back to the origins and follow the teachings of the Prophet of Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, Kadis, for that briefing. I now invite Jeff Chen, Vice President of Advocacy for the Falun Dafa Association of Washington, D.C., and he'll be speaking on the persecuted Falun Gong.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity. Falun Gong is a spiritual discipline of a Buddha school based upon principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It's also known as a Falun Dafa. It was introduced to the public in 1992, 31 years ago. 7 years later, the Atheist Communist Party of China started the campaign to eradicate Falun Gong in 1999. At that time, the government estimated 70 to 100 million Chinese people practice Falun Gong. So in the last 24 years, that many people have lost their freedom to practice their belief. It's a huge population, and it has become one of the biggest groups persecuted around the world. In the last 24 years, arbitrary detentions, disappearances, and torture happened widely across the country. Nearly 5,000 identified people died as a result of the persecution so far. Many more unknown people were killed for their organs, sold for huge profit. And the regime's policy was kill their bodies, bankrupt their finance, and ruin their reputation. And killing in detention is considered suicide. In one family of 6, the parents plus 4 adult children, 4 of them died due to the persecution, and hundreds of thousands were incarcerated for a certain amount of time. Just last year alone, 172 people died as a result of the persecution. 633 were sentenced with prison terms from 6 months to 15 years, even including seniors in their 80s. And that 15-year highest term was given to a disabled woman. And right before Beijing Winter Olympics, an artist was given 8 years in prison. And right before the Summer Olympics in 2008, her husband was tortured to death days after his arrest. And last year, one woman died 2 hours after her arrest, and another died 14 hours after. And I really like what Katrina quoted, what directly affects somebody really affects others indirectly. And I can give you noticeable cases. In fact, the victims are not just the persecuted Falun Gong practitioners, but actually everybody in China. To persecute millions of Falun Gong practitioners, sending them to prisons or labor camps, or expelling them from jobs or schools, the legal system had to be bent. And the morally corrupt people were placed in leadership positions. In the last 24 years, we've seen the overall morality in China decline tremendously. Then all Chinese suffer. We can see all kinds of fake goods circulate in the market, including poisoned food, fake vaccines, and even babies' formulas containing chemicals. And the social justice is everywhere. Teachers can be bribed, lawyers can be bribed, police officers, doctors, all can be bribed. And in the last 3-year pandemic, we have witnessed how CCP has been treating people's lives. Not just the people in China, but also people around the world. 3 years ago, when coronavirus originated in Wuhan, the CCP locked down the whole city, but let international travelers travel to everywhere around the world, spreading the virus. And when people's homes can be ransacked for their faith in China, when people are killed for their organs, then most of the Chinese turn their blind eyes to all these. To most of the Chinese, fair trade and intellectual property rights would be simply a laughingstock. Thus, countries like the US suffer greatly, indirectly. Once the religious freedom is restored in China, and as a morality is restored, many social problems in China and the trade issues facing us today can probably be resolved much more easily. We continue to call upon U.S. government and international community to take actions, effective actions, to stop CCP's atrocity. And Secretary Blinken is going to visit China next week. So we definitely hope he can raise the Falun Gong issue with the CCP leadership. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Very insightful. A lot of the information being shared today is information that many of us don't know, so we are grateful for that. Our next speaker is Akram Gizavi. He's the chairman of the World Hazara Council, and he'll be speaking on the persecution of the Hazaras worldwide.
Thank you very much. Almost all the speakers were in good standing as far as time is concerned, and I hope that I will be in that frame. Thank you very much, Amjad Khan, for inviting me to this gathering. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you all for having this gathering because it gives an opportunity for people like me and for people of other faiths and other communities that are being oppressed or persecuted around the world to give information about the plight of their people, to share information with all those others who have the same experience. I got from the lady the information or the idea that we should stick together because we have more or less a common destiny. It would be foolish when our oppressors are friendly, when they cooperate with each other, and we, the victims, don't understand each other or don't get together with each other or don't share experiences with each other. At the moment, for example, the Taliban are in cahoot with the Chinese government. And Uyghurs, we don't know what's going on. China is one of the oppressors, one of the autocratic regimes in the world, and so are the misogynist Taliban. And they're friendly. The Iranian regime suppresses dissent in the country. All the women, or most of the women, just for a piece of cloth, are being persecuted. Yet they are in cahoot with the Taliban in Afghanistan. They have a lot in common. But we, the Afghans or the Hazaras, don't have much to do with the Iranians. We should cooperate. We should strengthen each other's stand. So I said I'll try to be as much concise as I can. The Hazaras are Turkic Mongolian people living in Afghanistan for a long, long time, and a lot of historians believe that they are the main inhabitants of the country. We have our faith or our religion is Shia, Some of us are Sunnis and some others are Ismailis. So during the 1890s, the Brits, fearing that we will have an alliance with the Russians, so they brought one of their stooges called Abdurrahman and armed him and supported him. And he started the genocidal war against my people, the Hazaras. And their main theme was that these are Shias and they're infidels. They are not Muslims. So that's how they brought hordes of people from across the border and started the war against us. More than 60% of my people were massacred, and our women and girls, unfortunately, were sold to slavery in the Indian subcontinent, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. Our lands, our fertile lands were taken in central Afghanistan, in a lot of places such as Kandahar, Helmand. Those are the beautiful lands that was ours, but they are taken from us. So we are driven out of our land and forced to flee to the mountains. And yearly, hordes of Pashtun nomads come, and they have these decrees from the 1890s to pasture, to our pastures, and they graze and they live, and on the way they plunder our livelihoods and our fields. When the U.S. and coalition forces came to Afghanistan, we welcomed them with open arms. We thought that they were liberators because we were under the occupation, I call it, of the Taliban. They massacred more than 10,000 of my people in the northern city of Mazar-e-Sharif. So when they came, we welcomed them. And I tell you, there's all documents there. There's not one foreign soldier, American or otherwise, that has been killed by a Hazara. There has not been one suicide bomber from the Hazaras. We, for the whole century, we were deprived of all the things that a citizen could have. Socially, economically, politically, we were deprived of it. We had no education, but once we got the opportunity during the 20 years, we built universities of our own, schools of our own, hospitals of our own. And we have, in the moment, per capita, the highest number of educated women among us. And this is disliked by the Taliban because they are misogynist. They don't like women at all, and worst of all, they don't like educated women and a Hazara educated woman. So, when the U.S. decided to get out of Afghanistan, it was their policy, it was their interest, okay, but it was not timely. It shouldn't have been done at this time. All the achievements of 20 years were gone. They're gone now. So the women of Afghanistan mostly, and our women in particular, cannot go to schools, cannot go to universities, cannot go to work, cannot get out of the house. Just 3-4 days ago, they said if a woman is caught outside the house without a veil, she could be killed, and nobody can question. Can you imagine a society where half of the population are deprived of every right, even the right of getting out of their houses, or the right of work, or the right of education? But that is what we are faced with. Now, who's responsible for this? I don't want to name names, you all know, but certain forces, certain powers should have acted responsibly. They left us to the wolves. They left the slaughterhouse behind them. All honestly, I wholeheartedly support the lives of the American soldiers. But the Afghans, the Hazaras, are also human beings. They are being killed daily. They are being tortured daily. They are being kidnapped and raped. And nobody cares. Nobody says anything. I think I shouldn't talk about the Taliban, you know all. So in the end, I make 3 points. One, when I asked the United States, the superpower, and the Western world, the free world, to not recognize the Taliban. Do not recognize the Taliban. One. Secondly, stop financing the Taliban. No, we don't. Each week, $40 million is given to the Taliban. Cash. It's a taxpayer's money. Don't give it. These are terrorists. You brought them, reinstated them in Afghanistan. At least now don't prop them. And the last one is that we are facing genocide. We are facing a serious genocide. Please recognize this. And I just quote one sentence. The head of the Afghan Human Rights Commission in 2021 said, and I quote, our assessment, 2021, our assessment shows that the Hazara and Shia peoples of Afghanistan are at the risk of genocide, unquote. Thank you.
Thank you, Akram. You know, I've gotten to know the Hazara community over the past year, and also have advocated for them and have heard from them in Afghanistan. And I invite everyone here to really sit down and read about the persecution they're suffering. And it was an excellent opportunity today to hear from you, and hopefully we'll hear more in a more extended briefing. Thank you very much. Our final 2 representatives here, we're very delighted to have Nina Shea with us. Nina is a very dear friend and senior fellow and director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. She'll be speaking about the persecuted Christian community with a focus on Nigeria.
Thank you, Amjad. Thank you, everyone, and congratulations again to Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lanta-Sweat. It is an extraordinary coalition, and as I sat here listening to my co-panelists, whom I'm so honored to join, I think of how many countries we would not be able to having this discussion this afternoon or the summit. I've been tasked to talk about the persecution of Christians, and this is a global topic. The Open Doors says that 312 million Christians are suffering extreme or very high persecution today. I'm not going to attempt to do the whole world. I'm just going to look at Nigeria and just give you a little sample of what's happening there, because we don't hear about it enough. Again, Open Doors says that 90% of the Christians killed in the world last year were killed for their faith in Nigeria, and 90% of the world's abducted Christians occurred in Nigeria. The U.S., despite this, and they've been killed by a variety of actors, non-state actors and terrorist groups, and their government does nothing to protect them or to prosecute those who are carrying out these atrocities. Yusuf, first of all, the State Department last year said that there was, it delisted them from the country of particular concern list under the International Religious Freedom Act. That's the world's worst persecutor list, without real explanation. Yusuf said it, in fact, that's the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, of which I was proud to say I was a member for 12 years as a commissioner. Yusuf said it's inexplicable that the State Department has turned a blind eye to what is happening on the religious freedom front there. There's general mayhem and lawlessness in Nigeria, so it's often hard in those situations, as it was in Iraq, Afghanistan, to detect that a particular religious group is targeted. But if you look at what is happening to the Christian leadership, what is happening to Christian churches, and their rural communities, it becomes very clear. Aid to the Church in Need, a pontifical group, said that 20 Catholic priests were abducted last year, 5 of them killed. And then, by the way, in 1 year, 5,000 Christians were killed for their faith in Nigeria. The State Department said this rampant killing of the priests is non-ideological, and that it's non-ideological criminality, and it's blamed it on the victims themselves for traveling at night without security. 2 weeks ago, Father Ache was in Niger State, was killed and his body burned in the middle of the night in his rectory at St. Peter and Paul's Church by people who broke in, armed bandits yelling Allahu Akbar. And this is repeated over and over and over again. The cases that we've documented showing that these priests were in their residences or in their churches when they were killed and attacked and abducted. Interestingly enough, or tragically enough, Father Ache died in this attack. It was not his first attack. His church was bombed on Christmas Day, St. Teresa's Church outside of Abuja, about a decade ago. He was also abducted before. All churches are affected, not just Catholics. The Methodist top prelate was abducted in May, and along with one of his bishops and another minister, and they were released after they paid $250,000 in ransom. But it was clearly for religious reasons, according to what their press conference they said. Vatican reports that 17,000 churches have been destroyed in Nigeria since 2009. Again, the attacks were Boko Haram militants, ISIS version in West Africa, and Fulani herdsmen. For the first time in June, in southern Nigeria, most of these attacks, these atrocities are occurring in the center and the north of Nigeria. And there are 100 million Christians in Nigeria, but in those areas, they tend to be in minority areas. In the south, which is majority Christian, a church was attacked on Pentecost Sunday. 40 worshipers were massacred and scores more wounded. Again, there was no arrest, even though this took place in the city over a half-an-hour-long attack. There were arrests, but there have been no prosecutions or punishments. Yusuf has concluded, and I think rightly so, that the Nigerian government has routinely failed to investigate these attacks on Christian communities and prosecute those responsible, demonstrating a problematic level of apathy on the part of state officials. They've been attacking, all these different various non-state actors have been attacking entire villages, rural villages, and massacring, beheading, and so forth. On January 19th, that's 10 days ago, there was such an attack in Benue State of a settlement of Christians, and 11 people were beheaded in that attack. That settlement was of internally displaced Christians. They had already fled their home community because of such attacks. 40 Christians were reported killed in December in another attack in Kaduna State. Let me just say that that there is a bill that is being considered now in Congress. I think a sense of Congress is needed when it becomes public. We're going to ask your support to get behind it, and the bill provides for putting Nigeria back on the list of countries of particular concern, and of also appointing a special envoy. This is really important because the United States State Department is obviously not getting the right information. Nigeria is the most populous country in Sub-Sahara. If it divides along religious ethnic lines, as it's becoming apparent, it will destabilize the entire region. And we heard about Burkina Faso earlier today. It's also being affected by spread of extremism. So over the course of my career and at Hudson Institute, where I am now, I have written about and advocated for all the groups on the panel today at one time or another, and I pledge I will continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina, and you indeed have done so for so many years. Really appreciate that. Here at the end, I would like to invite Eric Fussfield, who's the Director of Legislative Affairs at B'nai B'rith International, to speak on rising global anti-Semitism.
Excuse me, I'm from Pakistan. Can I get 2-3 minutes for Pakistani Christian and Hindus, if possible? Later.
Well, I can't speak to that, but I would make a plea. The volume on the conversations at that end is proving a little bit distracting to the middle of the room. The program's almost over. If you could bear with us, I'd appreciate it, and others would, I think. I'm Rabbi Eric Fussfield of B'nai B'rith International. We are the oldest Jewish advocacy and social service organization, and I want to note, before I start talking about anti-Semitism, the passion that the previous speakers have spoken with is palpable. And this is a passion that I think should inspire outrage among all of us, but it should, more than that, it should inspire action. And so I think we should all take that to heart. 3 minutes is scarcely enough time to cover the world's oldest and most persistent social illness, which is anti-Semitism. But I will give an overview, and then I will give some action items for us to think about as we leave. Anti-Semitism is a global problem, and it's more and more in recent years it's become an American problem. We are used to thinking of it as something that was really reached a peak in Europe over the past 20 years. Well, now it's in our backyard. I'm talking about physical attacks on Jewish institutions and individuals. We've had shootings in synagogues in Pittsburgh and San Diego, other targets. And our hate crime, the FBI hate crimes data tell us that Jews are by far among religious groups the most targeted in this country in terms of hate crimes. But it's not just hate crimes. It's anti-Semitic tropes, anti-Semitic attitudes that are expressed in the public discourse, in social media and elsewhere. And this reflects a mainstreaming of classical anti-Semitic motifs that used to be taboo, but now they're becoming more and more acceptable. And when you have celebrities like Kanye West, for example, spouting anti-Semitic rhetoric, it takes on a certain level of acceptability unless people push back, and people have. But it also shows the extent to which young people are embracing these ideas. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is growing among youth, and that is a big problem for the future. Holocaust denial and distortion is a common feature of anti-Semitism. We're seeing a lot of that in the public discourse. Anti-Israel hatred. And I want to be very clear about what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about criticism of policies, because Israel is a democratic country. Their citizens criticize their government's policies. It's sort of a national sport there. We do this here in America, of course, in European countries. This is all normal. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the demonization of Israel, the denial of Israel's right to exist, labeling Israel with the worst the worst allegation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, things like that are aimed at relegating Israel to pariah status, to remove it from the international community and weaken it, ultimately leading toward its elimination. This is something we see certainly on social media quite a bit. We also see it at the United Nations, where anti-Israel hatred, the one-sided anti-Israel bias that we see at the UN, it's systemic. It's built into structures at the UN that perpetuate this. It's built into the annual ritual condemnations of Israel that are passed in New York and at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. Anti-Semitism is pervasive in a way that we see it on the far left, we see it on the far right, and we see it among radical extremist groups. And it is the obligation of all of us to fight it wherever we see it. And I want to be clear about this, because we have a way, and we have a divided electorate, and it's the job of our political parties to gain partisan advantage in public policy issues that we all wrestle about. But if you are on the center left and you see anti-Semitism on the far right, and you call it out, and you should. If you're on the center right and you see anti-Semitism on the far left, you call it out, and you should. But what is really incumbent upon all of us is to call it out wherever we see it, even if it's not convenient for us politically or personally. We need to call it out. So I'm going to end with 4 policy recommendations. The first one is that we need help from Congress on. We have some congressional staffers here, and we also have many allies or potential allies here, and these are things that I hope we can come together on, join forces on. We have been campaigning for the administration to issue a regulation, a proposed regulation, that would codify principles that were contained in a 2019 White House executive order. What principles am I talking about? The embrace of the working definition on anti-Semitism issued by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in 2016. And this is a working definition. You can find it online very easily. It was put forward by the 36 or so countries, including the U.S., who belong to the IRA. It's called International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. But it's been adopted since then by dozens of countries around the world, not just at the federal level, but regional and local levels. And so we need to codify this working definition. We need to make clear that Jews are a protected class under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and they deserve the same protections that other groups do under that law. So we want to see that those principles codified by the administration. They have pushed it back 12 months, another 12 months. their failure to turn these executive order principles into law is hurting our community, and they need to take firm action, and Congress should push them in that direction. At the same time that we're struggling with that issue, FBI data, we've had a double whammy in the last 2 months, because we had the problem with the regulation, but also the problem with the realization that law enforcement authorities are underreporting anti-Semitism. The numbers of hate crimes are going down. Why? Because the problem is less? No. Because fewer law enforcement agencies are reporting on it. The percentage of law enforcement agencies reporting on anti-Semitic hate crimes is going down by 20%. We need Congress to push the administration to correct this problem. Two more. One is a bill called the HEAL Act, Holocaust Education and Anti-Semitism Lessons Act. This is a bipartisan initiative. All of these are bipartisan initiatives. This one was spearheaded by Representatives Gottheimer and McCall, and this would direct the U.S. Holocaust Museum to report to Congress about the state of Holocaust education in public schools in America. We need to, because of all the other indicators that I've laid out for you, we need to worry about what our youth are being taught, and they need to learn the lessons of history. Finally, with respect to anti-Semitism and anti-Israel hatred at the United Nations, the UN Human Rights Council has established a commission of inquiry on the West Bank, and this is has all the earmarks of a travesty. It's going to be another festival of condemnation of Israel, and we need there is a bill called the COI Elimination Act that would defund that exercise in anti-Semitic, anti-Israel hatred. And so we need that passed. So on all of these things, as is always the case, we need allies, and let's work together to counter anti-Semitism and the other hatreds that have been spoken about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Hesfield. I appreciate that. In this limited time, we covered quite a bit of ground, and we did that by design, and thank you for your patience. We are at our end now. I just wanted to say here in closing that this is really amazing to see just everyone standing in solidarity with the persecuted. When the persecuted fight for the persecuted, that's when the real change will take place. So if you heard something tonight about a community you've never heard about, then you have been educated in just a brief amount of time. And just imagine the pain in the hearts of some of the people who spoke today, and the genocide and potential genocide and crimes against humanity that these communities are facing. Some of these communities don't have advocates on the Hill. We are your advocates. We are the advocates for these communities. It's our obligation, our moral obligation, to stand for those who do not believe what we believe, so that we can believe what we believe. And that's the point of tonight. And it's just fantastic. I want to thank our partners, the IRF Secretariat. Greg is here, and Annie. Thank you so much. There's a wonderful reception here. Please eat food, enjoy the rest of this session, interact, make allies, and we look forward to a great summit. Thank you very much.